Hey, good day, everybody. Hello and welcome back to yet another IBR interview. My name is Krish, and this is my 40th session as an interviewer. So it has been quite a journey for myself, and this in this journey, I've had the unique privilege of rubbing shoulders with some luminaries. In the boxer world over. Now, the primary intent of these sessions are knowledge share and an opportunity for you to hear the perspectives presented by the guest. However, these interviews or the views that are presented by the guest are the views of the guest and not of IBR or myself. On my guest chair today is Yvonne Miller from the famous Walkon Boxers, a kennel which she um, which he has run with her husband, Walker Miller. Yvonne and Walker recently announced their retirement from breeding and showing boxes after almost 40 years in the breed, or more than 40 years in the breed. Now, during this time, Walkon Boxers has garnered some prestigious wins and titles, including that of UK's most successful CC winning kennel. Iwan, thank you for making time to share details of your journey. It is a pleasure and a privilege to have you on the guest chair. How are you doing this morning? Or
I'm
this afternoon, rather?
I'm fine, thank you, and thank you for inviting me to join your group. It's a privilege to be asked, and I hope that we all get something out of it today.
Absolutely. Iwan, I actually, your journey has been extensive. And again, I think we can keep on talking, but for the benefit of time, I'm going to actually, I put some questions together. And of course, for those ones that are watching, this is also an invitation for you to post your questions under the comments so that I can put it forward to put it to Iwan. My only ask is that you keep the questions pertinent to the topic that is being discussed so that we can make the best use of the time. Um, One, I think you need very little introduction in the world of boxers, and people know you well. But for those ones that are new to the game who might not have the benefit of knowing your journey, could you tell us how you got started in dogs and in dog shows?
Okay. Um, Basically, both my husband and I were brought up with a family pet. We both were brought up with dogs. I grew up in a family with a poodle, and Walker was born into a family with a boxer, progressed to a dachshund, and then eventually a Doberman, which incidentally his mum showed at championship show level, but not to any great extent. We were married in 1977. We moved away from our hometown of Glasgow, came down to southwest Scotland, where Walker was a large animal vet, did a small amount of small animal. And as we were basically both dog lovers, animal lovers, it sort of seemed natural that at some point we would get pet. We were both working full time. So a dog sort of was out of the question. I brought a stray kitten home from hockey practice one night. So that became the first of very many animals that we've had. My first love really was horses, but, we got a kitten. And then maybe about a year later, we decided that we could get a dog. Walker could take it to work with him. He could take it around the farms. He could let it out, so it was doable. So, as I say, about a year after we were married, we bought our first pet boxer. She was a red bitch. We spent one Sunday phoning round breeder after breeder to try and get our idea of a boxer, which was a red and white bitch, nice even markings, 4 white paws. So we eventually found the bitch, and that was basically the start of our introduction to boxers.
Hmm. And how did the dog show bug bite you?
Well, after we had had the dog for, I don't know, a year maybe. We were forever taking her out into the fields, getting her to run between us, and we thought it would be nice if she had a companion. So in our sort of naive way, we thought that we would breed from her, keep a puppy, but if we showed her first, that would raise the value of her puppies and we would sell them easier, etc. So we took her to a local show in Stranraer, very small, what they called a sanction show in these days. I think I was actually away playing hockey, and Walker's mum took her to the dog show, and she won 4th, I think, in junior bitch. And that was really the first dog show we went to, and that was the start of it. She herself, she was a nice bitch, and she was a good brute bitch in the sense that she always produced better than herself. But she produced us quite a nice daughter who did quite a lot of winning in Scotland at open show level, and that really, it spiraled from there. That got the bug.
Right. Of course, and the rest is history, of course.
Yeah.
Now, again, I know that you actually you have you have been successful, and the number of dogs that you produced has actually been a proof of that. But again, how did you, when you decided that you were going to actually get more and more into this breed and get into the breeding, and not a lot of people take up breeding, but you did, and how was your learning curve constructed? Did you have any mentors that actually help you get a mental mindset of what the boxer should look like and what you want to breed and stuff like that?
I suppose when we started, we got involved with the local dog training club, and the people that ran that club actually bred golden retrievers, and we went along with our first pet bitch, and we went to the training classes, and this couple took us under their wing, and they taught us the fundamentals of how to handle. They encouraged us to take the training class ourselves, so we got an idea of what it was like to judge. They explained the principles of breeding, the principles of line breeding, which is sort of where we started and is the model that we've always followed. So they really were the driving force that encouraged us, from the decision of having our first litter and then keeping a dog from that. They sort of were our mentors and encouraged us from there.
Right. I got a few people that had tuned in that are saying hi to you. Robert McDougall says,
"Hi, Robert.
Looking lovely." And our friend from Sweden, Tron Eriksson, shares his love. So does Linda Box, and we got more people joining us as we speak. Again, I want to actually ask you this question. I want to actually go back to the point about mentors. Did you actually have, there was quite a few luminaries in the boxer world at the time that you started, quite a few big names in the sport. Did you actually, what was their role in actually helping you progress in the breed? Because I've heard this from a lot of people, and I've heard a lot of guests that have come from UK, that a dog show in UK is like a family outing, right? Yeah. People are always welcome and ready to share ideas and perspectives about things. If you need some help, they'll be actually the first one to actually come in and tell you, hey, this is something you could be doing better, right? How was it when you started?
Well, I suppose maybe you have to understand that we live in a fairly rural, remote area compared to other dog breeders. We're sort of 2 hours to the nearest motorway, In terms of championship shows, we're 2.5, 3 hours to the nearest championship show. Whereas in England, a lot of people live within an hour of other of dog shows. They live locally to other breeders. We never lived anywhere near other boxer breeders. Our nearest boxer breeders would be, and still are, probably 2 hours away on either side of us. So that's why we never really had a boxer mentor, if you like. It was our golden retriever friends.
Right.
What we did do, though, when we started was, we started at the bottom with the small shows. We did local open shows. We used to go quite often to Ireland to open shows, because where we live in Scotland is the ferry port to Northern Ireland. So in some ways, Ireland is our nearest show area. So we quite often would get on the boat and go across to Ireland, go to shows. And right at the beginning of our boxer career, we met Anne and Millicent Ingram. So they probably are our oldest boxer friends. Millicent being very experienced in the breed, and Anne, of course, herself, were a great source of wisdom and information for us to begin with.
Right.
And I still would probably say, look most fondly back on Millicent as the one person of that generation that was always good to us and helped us and gave us pearls of wisdom.
Right.
Thereafter, we became friendly with other exhibitors, and I think grew up and developed with them. And we would go and visit other kennels. We always believed that, one of the ways to learn was to visit other more experienced kennels, go and see litters of puppies. So either on our own or with, our fellow exhibitors, the likes of Helen and Eddie Banks, Jenny and Peter Whitaker, Annette Strachan Abel as was. We would go and visit Sheila Cartwright, for example, go and see Sheila's puppies. We would go and visit Mary Hamilton, see her puppies. And just by looking at other people's puppies, our learning curve developed, our knowledge developed. And you start off with your first dog and you think it's perfect. My first box, I had all the things the standard said. I didn't realise they weren't actually correct, but it had all the things. It had 2 ears, it had 2 eyes. And then, you breed a litter and you realise, this one's better than that one. Right. Then you breed another litter and you learn, now I understand what people are saying. And again, you go to look at other people's puppies and they point things out. So, that's, I suppose, how our learning curve developed. We really did not have anybody locally that we could rely on.
Right. And you know what? For the longest time, I actually, I got to make a confession. For the longest time, I actually mispronounced the name of your kennel. I used to call your kennel Walkon Boxers.
Right.
Not till this time when my friend in Australia, Eileen Custons,
said,
you got to stop there, right on your tracks. It's not Walkon Boxers, it's Walk-on Boxers. What's the backstory behind your prefix?
Well, it's really quite simple. It's a mixture of Walker and Yvonne. Okay. So it's the Walker bit and the on bit of Yvonne, so walk on. So that's. I think, to be honest, we applied for something else right at the beginning, and I think walk on was our third choice. But anyway, it turned out I think it was quite appropriate.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. I want to move slightly, into your, into your foundation dogs now. So I know that your foundation dogs were from Sheila's kennel. It was actually I think 2 full brothers, if I'm not wrong, Tiergard Famous Grouse and Tiergard Glenmorangie.
Yeah.
What was your thought process behind choosing these dogs as your foundation styles for your breeding program?
Well, if I go back to the first bitch we bought as a pet, she was by a dog called Aldine Golden Wonder of Trywell, Champion Aldine Golden Wonder of Trywell. And for our first litter, we mated her back to her grandfather. That was, the start of our understanding that line breeding, grandparent to grandchild, half brother to half sister, was sort of the way to go to consolidate type and maintain type. After that first litter, we began to realize that the way forward was the prolific stud dog, or the top winning stud dog was grouse, famous grouse. Mm-hmm. And that if we were to progress, that line was a lot more live and active than the line that our first bitch had come from. So it was at that point, I think, our first litter was back to the grandfather. Our second litter was to the grandfather's brother. And then our third litter, we went to grouse. Mm. And that produced a very nice bitch who actually won our first reserve CC. And at that time, we had bought Pop My Cork from Jenny Townsend, who was by Glenmorangie. And we decided that when it came to mating the grouse bitch, we would mate her to Glenmorangie, which nowadays might be considered a bit close, but whatever, in these days, that's what one did. So, yes, and that bitch, actually, the result of that litter, she became a champion, as did the Glenmorangie dog. So, yes, that initial mating to grouse and then consolidating by 2 children that were by Glen, that really was the whole foundation of the kennel.
Right. Now, you actually mentioned about Famous Grouse and Glenmorangie. I've actually, and again, Sheila didn't mention this, but again, this has been cataloged in a variety of articles that I've read about the evolution of English boxers. That these boxers were quite influential in their times, to the point that they changed the complexion of how the boxer looked in the modern era. What would you say they were different in? When you actually saw how are they different from the dogs that they actually succeeded? Or,
well, bearing in mind that really we came into the breed, when we came into the breed, the grouse was the stud dog of the moment. We really didn't have an awful lot of experience of the dogs before that, physical experience. I remember we saw Gremlin Summer Storm. I think we only ever saw him once, and that was when he won his last CC. So the era before grouse, I know a lot of people will talk and say, this dog was this and this dog was that. From an actual personal point of view, I can't really say we knew these dogs. I know them from photographs, etc. But again, living up here, we weren't going round a lot of shows at weekends and so on. So grouse and Glen, yes, I knew personally, I knew quite well, and I know what they brought to the breed at that time, which was, I believe, improved heads. I think grouse brought a lovely head type to the breed. Nice dark eyes. I remember light eyes being really quite a severe problem when we came into the breed, and I think grouse and Glen certainly helped there. He was a very compact, what I would call a cobby type of boxer, and I would say he had what I would describe as short, long bones. So he was very much in proportion, but he wasn't a big dog. And he produced, in my opinion, little grouselets, which were like that. They were this lovely, compact, square boxer with a lovely headpiece. Glenn was a bit, maybe a bit taller himself. And I would say he maybe produced a slightly different type, but it was from the same kennel. It was still along the same lines.
Right.
And between them, I think Grouse was top, the British Boxer Club's top sire for, I think, 7 years from when we came into the breed. He was followed by Glenn for the next couple of years. And I think then for the next 5 or 6 years or whatever, there were that number of dogs that took over the role as top sire, but they all went back to Glenn and Grouse and Storm, among other dogs, but fundamentally. So for that period of, I don't know, maybe the first 15 years when we were in the breed, that was sort of the type that we were aiming for, and I would say was prevalent.
Right. Very true. You know, again, I think your journey is very well cataloged. There is a website for those folks that didn't know this. I'm sure a lot of people know this and have been on your website. Your journey is very well cataloged, including the names of all your winners, CC winners. Everything is cataloged. What I noticed was, yes, initially you did a lot of line breeding on grouse. What I wanted to ask you was this, you know, and you also mentioned that as you bred, each litter was an evolution in itself, in your knowledge, in the quality of puppies that you bred.
Yep.
What were some of the virtues that you wanted to build with your breeding program when you actually started your breeding program?
Well, I think, I assume what we did, I assume most breeders, you when you start off, if you have a fault in your line, that becomes a bit of a fixation. So you're always trying to improve on that. And, you know, as I say, we started with our first boxer and we thought she was perfect. She had flying ears. So our first litter, we got rid of the flying ears. But the bitch was cut away on one side. She had no black muzzle. Third litter, we got rid of that. You know, then we got an unpigmented eye. So I think originally our weakness was our heads. They weren't. They were okay. The mouths were relatively good, but they were a bit plain, the heads, which I think is again why we first went to grouse, to try and improve our heads. So heads was something that we initially wanted to improve, and therefore I think I've been always very passionate about ever since. Mouths, we started with good mouths, and I'd like to think we've always had good mouths. We used the odd dog where a narrow rounded, what I would call spoon mouth, was introduced, and we found very difficult to get rid of. So again, mouths is something that we've always tried to concentrate on. Our back ends were always reasonably good, but we felt initially we didn't have enough angle and length of upper arm. Our fronts shoulders weren't too bad, but the upper arm wasn't great. So again, at one point we went to Mary Hambleton's Dolph to try and improve the upper arm. So they are the sort of things that over the years have been our focus, if you like.
Right. Very true. I know that you have an Australian connection. It's been at least from the boxers, as far as boxers is concerned. I know you've judged a few times in Australia and New Zealand,
Yep.
but your connection does not end there. Your connection also brought you a dog back. The story of not Crocodile Dundee, but Bundy, the dog that that he brought back. It was Blueprint, I think, bred by Mark Johnston.
That's right.
Blueprint burned Skittles at Walkon.
Yep.
Sorry, see, I'm saying Walkon. It's Walkon. Sorry, my bad.
That's it.
So, could you tell us the story of Bundy?
Yep. I think this is probably our defining moment in boxers. I don't know what year, it'd be 1990, I think. I can't remember. We were at Crufts and Pop My Cork, the Glenmorangie son, won Best of Breed under Judge Lorna Greathead. And at the show was a lady called Diane Bradshaw, Oztop Boxers from Australia, who had written to us in the past and said she was quite interested in our breeding and so on. She was at Crufts and appeared on our doorstep the next day in a very snowy Scotland to see our dogs. Now, we had a son of Pop My Cork at the time, that again we had bought from Jenny Townsend. His name was General Pop Back to Walkon. And Diane fell in love with the dog and asked if she could take him to Australia, buy him and take him back to Australia, which she did. She then wrote to us and said that she had a friend who was looking for a Glenmorangie bitch. Could we help her? And that friend was Mark Johnston. Now, we didn't have a Glenmorangie bitch, but our Glenmorangie daughter was due to be mated, and we mated her to Glenfall the Gladiator, all similar breeding, and sent a bitch from that litter out to Australia as well. So we've now sent 2 dogs across the world, which are now mated together. The resulting litter we saw when we went out to Australia, they were about 9.5 weeks old. We had never kept a dog from that bitch line, which was proving to be a very good bitch line for us. So we asked Mark if we could buy the dog and bring him back to Scotland. So he was a very expensive import for a mating that we could have done in our back garden had we never sent the 2 to Australia in the first place. So, yeah, that is our connection with Australia. We brought the dog back. We have made lifelong friends out of that relationship. And Bundy, I think, the history shows he then became the next era of dominant dogs in the UK. And I think, has basically sort of changed the course of British boxers for that period of time.
Right. And I actually happened to also read the eulogy that you wrote for Bundy. When you were actually making that trip to Australia, I think he lived up to I think 12 or 13 is what I recollect.
I think he was 2 or 3 days off his 13th birthday. I think the day we landed, the last trip we took to Australia, I think he would have been 13 that day when we landed in Australia, but whatever.
What are some of the virtues that this dog brought to your breeding program? And when you say he actually contributed to the UK boxers, what did you think? What did he bring to the UK boxers?
Well, if I can just go back a little bit, when we first went out to Australia to see that litter, we were very impressed with the progeny of the father, the pop back dog we had sent out there, who was Bundy's father. We went to dog shows, and every time a dog came in the ring, you could tell that it was one of his progeny. He produced this lovely, sharp, elegant outline, and they were all quite distinctive, and yet they were to all sorts of different bloodlines. So that quite impressed us, which is one of the reasons we decided to bring Bundy back. And in turn, that's exactly what Bundy himself did. He produced a wee bit more height of foreleg than what was currently in the UK. So I think his height and his elegance were needed. He had the most superb show temperament. I mean, he just was a show dog through and through. Might not have been perfect, but he was a showman. So again, he brought this personality to the breed. He did produce some lovely boxer heads, and he also he had a superb mouth, and he produced a good mouth. Again, it's one of these things, you know, not all dogs do it, but I would say he could correct a bad mouth in a generation. Which I think is sort of quite a virtue. So they were the types of things that he brought to the breed.
Right. I want to actually talk about Walker. You know, I know he's not doing this interview along with you. Maybe I will get an opportunity to actually have him on the guest chair sometime in the future. But you and him as a team, who actually does one of you decide with the head and the other with the heart? Or you did?
Yeah. I would say I'm the heart and he's the head. He's the one that keeps me on the straight and narrow.
Okay. And how much of your success as a kennel, as Walkon Boxers, do you attribute to having an in-house vet?
Well, first of all, let me say, I think in dog showing per se, I think a partnership tends to be more successful than an individual. I think if you look at any of the big successful kennels, there's usually been a partnership rather than an individual. And I think that's because there is somebody there to bounce ideas off, to disagree with you, to keep your mind open, share the driving, somebody to talk to when you come out the ring and moan about the judge and all the rest of it, whatever. So, my immediate reaction might be to say, well, because he's a vet, it doesn't make any difference. But I suppose it does, actually. As I say, I'm the heart, he's the head. I'm the exhibitor, he's the breeder. And I think that veterinary knowledge certainly has been a bonus when it's come to breeding. Not only the knowledge, but the opportunity to intervene at an early stage, either with a whelping bitch or even a dog that's sick, not having to wait in the end of a phone for a vet or whatever. We've had the opportunity to react very quickly to things. So I suppose that is a bonus. And I suppose also by virtue of the fact that young assistants join your practice and are constantly maybe moving on or whatever, they're bringing the latest up-to-date information to the practice. Therefore, Walker was always abreast of, the latest blood test for a bitch that's come in season, or vaccine for in-whelp bitches or whatever. So, I suppose from that point of view, it has actually been quite a big bonus.
Right. Conception rates were never a problem.
No.
Okay.
No, okay. We always had reasonably good litter sizes. So, no, not really.
Right. I want to actually take a step back. I want to actually go back and get your perspective about UK boxers. Now, what are some of the attributes in your observation over the years that UK boxers have grown in strength? in a breed? Like, for example, 40 years of you're observing the breed. What are some of the attributes that they've grown in strength over the years?
I think heads have improved. I mean, I think that's the obvious thing. Well, I mean, I've touched on it already. Heads, eye colour, that's definitely improved. I think probably overall conformation has improved as well. It's difficult. I mean, I think fundamentally the breed remains the same. But there are small degrees of things that change. But they come and go a bit. You know, during one era something improves and then maybe falls off again. That's partly due to, you know, the stud dog of the moment, the fashions or whatever. But I think the sort of obvious things to me that I've seen improve or change in the breed over the years is eye colour. Again, I mentioned that earlier. There used to be a lot of what I would call yellow eyes. And we have gradually moved to these nice, dark, expressive eyes. Although, alarmingly, when I last judged, I did actually judge dogs with what I would describe as unacceptably light eyes. So that's just something we maybe have to watch here. Temperament, I think, is something that has improved dramatically over the time I've been in boxers. Again, when we first came in to boxers, the dogs were quite sparky in the ring, very much on their toes. I presume because at that point the breed wasn't that long established in the UK. So having their ancestors having come from continental stock, they were a bit more assertive. And over the years, that temperament has become more manageable, less, I don't mean aggressive, less assertive and more manageable, because I assume that in the UK we have never bred working dogs. We've only bred boxers as pets. Therefore, we have not tried to develop that assertive temperament. In fact, for a family pet, it's really not been particularly desirable. So over the years, I've seen temperament improve. There are less nervous dogs than there were before. Nervousness, in my opinion, being the flip side of the coin, you know, aggressive, nervous, two sides of the one coin. There are not as many nervous dogs as there were, but we do still have some. And I think that's something breeders do need to be conscious of and careful with. We've all had them. I've had them myself, but I've always tried to make a point not to breed from them, because I just think that's potentially creating future problems for you. So again, I think that has reduced. There still are some, and I think people should just be aware that it's maybe not the best route to go down. What else? Feet have improved, I think. Pasterns, probably, but we still do have some horribly sloping pasterns. But generally, I don't think that's a problem in the UK. Mouths come and go. Again, I would say since we started, you don't get the same number of wry mouths. You don't get the same number of rounded, narrow rounded mouths. But equally, I think we've cycled a bit. I don't think you get as many good broad mouths as we did have at one time. I just think that's something that breeders really do need to think about. Just because it's not on show doesn't mean it can be ignored. Because I think it is a fundamental characteristic of the breed.
Right. Now I know that you mentioned a lot about expression. When you say eyes, expression. You talk about temperament. That's actually something carried forward in the expression as well. Now, how much of is I've also heard this, and of course I've not laid my hands on a UK boxer myself, but I've read and I've spoken with people who have said this. How big of a problem is excessive leather or wrinkling with the UK boxer?
It varies. It does vary. I mean, there's good and bad. I mean, I do not like excessive wrinkle in a dog's head. It's not correct. There's nothing nicer than a lovely, clean skull with wrinkle appearing, obviously, when it's alert. But yes, you do get. I'm not sure it's as common now as it was. But yes, you do get these hard rolls of skin on the top of a dog's head. And again, it's just an education thing. People really just need to realise that that doesn't give a dog a strong head. That gives a dog an over-wrinkled head that isn't right. And the strength in a dog's head's in its structure, not in, over-wrinkling.
Right.
It's... again, jowls. Again, I don't think that's an excessive problem. Again, I think if the head's balanced, these problems sort themselves out. But
right.
The eyes. Getting back to the eyes, in any breed of dog, to me, the eyes are the important thing. And in a boxer, you should be able to see right through to a boxer's soul through its eyes. I mean, to me, when I can see what's going on in that boxer's brain by looking at his eyes, to me, that's just what its expression should be like.
Right. Now, I know that blending has been tried. When I say blending, I say, breeders in the UK have over the years introduced dogs from US from Europe into their breeding program. Do you think the blend attempts have been successful? Again, to a great, to whatever extent they have been.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think to a greater extent, yes, they probably have, because somewhere I think the British boxer is that middle ground. It's not as exaggerated, as tall as the Northern American dogs are. It's not as front heavy as, say, some of the continental dogs are. We are somewhere in the middle. And I think the Northern American dogs give us a lot of style, beautiful crested necks. Continental dogs give us this good front angulation, etc. It's not particularly easy to get it to work in one generation, though. You might get it in one generation, but it's not necessarily that easy to keep. I found to keep it breeding on. So I think it's a very slow process that we've arrived at over years. We personally have tried introducing things from the continental lines and have found that we've got it in one generation and lost it again in the next. But maybe that's because we only did it as a one-off outcross and didn't concentrate enough on it. I don't know.
You actually you answered my next question. My next question was going to be if European and American boxers or styles of boxers, not American boxers, they are both boxers, can be considered to be extremes in styles. Would you call UK boxers to be a median in style? Well, you answer that question. So do you actually think from a blending perspective, and of course, um, people are better off working with the median than working with extremes.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be your position?
Well, yes, I would say so. But there again, I'm sort of biased because um, I'm a UK boxer breeder, exhibitor, and therefore that is, in my mind, what a boxer should look like.
Mm.
I admire both of the extremes passionately in a lot of ways, but they're not actually necessarily what I would want to breed and own myself.
Mm.
So yes, I like the middle ground, but there is nothing more impressive than seeing a powerful continental boxer stood with its front legs underneath its chest, straining on the end of its leash, looking very impressive. I mean, I just think they're gorgeous.
Mm.
And likewise, to see that beautiful crest coming out of the back of an American dog's neck, its style, its elegance, just beautiful. But yeah, they are two extremes, and I would go for the middle ground.
Right. You actually worn multiple hats. Breeder, handler, judge. Which of these roles do you enjoy the most, and why is that?
Definitely handling.
Okay.
I have always been a sort of reluctant breeder. I think going back to what we discussed earlier, Walker's always been the breeder. As a vet, breeding any kind of animal is of huge interest and to him, and a joy to him. So he's sort of always been the one that's pushed me a wee bit into the breeding. Judging, I enjoy, but not to the exclusion of everything else. I feel it's something that anybody who takes out of a sport or a hobby, or who has taken a lot out of a sport or a hobby, really has to put something back into it. And I think especially in a thing like dog showing, where it's a subjective thing, you really do owe it to try and give back some of your experience. So I think, yes, you have to judge, but if I never judged again, well, I probably would be okay. I enjoy it, and I used to enjoy judging other breeds as well, but because I think you sometimes you have to be careful. You can become very hypercritical of your own breed and disappoint yourself, and go out and say, well, these aren't perfect. Well, they're never going to be perfect. So sometimes I can find it a wee bit challenging from that point of view, but yeah.
Right.
Exhibitor, basically.
Right.
Or an exhibitionist, I'm not quite sure which.
I know this is actually, I want to get your viewpoint on this particular question. I know that you being the top CC winning kennel, you've had more than one once in a lifetime dog. Maybe once in a lifetime dog might not be the right term, but you've had more than one dog that you have dominated the show ring with over the years. And I know for people that are not familiar with, or people from North America, the show system works slightly differently in terms of, it's a CC that gets awarded versus the dogs that become a champion based on points. So a dog can actually win any number of CCs as long as it continues to win.
Yep.
So my question to you here is this: as a breed custodian, right? So as somebody who's actually been in a breed, and not as a breeder, from a custodian perspective, would you rather prefer a season which produced many champions, instead of a year when one individual dog swept all the CCs or the honors?
Personally, I think that I'm not a lover of the likes of a champions class. I'm not a lover of dogs being limited to the number of CCs they can win, because I think it stops other dogs achieving a level of quality. If you've got a good dog, he's there to be beaten. And if your dog is capable of beating him, then it's a good dog. If it's just a numbers game where there's a certain number of challenge certificates available throughout the year and they're going to get spread about, I don't know that that's particularly good for maintaining the standard in a breed. I think if you ask any owner of a top dog, you'll find that very few dogs are prevented from gaining their title by that dog. In other words, if you've got a dog that's won 3 reserve tickets to that one big winning dog, you can say that dog stopped my dog becoming a champion. But I think you'll find there's very few that actually happens to. Most dogs that are good enough, in my opinion, get there anyway.
Right.
And I don't think many big winning animals actually ever stop. I think they may stop mediocre dogs gaining their title, but they don't stop good dogs gaining their title.
Right.
That's my personal opinion, but as I say, I think if you ask other people with big winning dogs, I think you probably get a similar answer.
Right. I actually wanted to actually ask you this one here. So in terms of what has kept you going, when you look back and now you've actually retired or you announced the retirement, but if you look at the years that have gone by, what has been your recipe for success, being a successful show boxer kennel?
Well, first of all, what's kept me going is I'm hideously competitive. It doesn't matter what I do, it's in my nature. I can't help myself. So that's the thing that's sort of always driven me. And I've sort of never found anything, never thought I would find anything to replace that buzz that I get out of showing dogs. How we've lasted, you only last as long as you've got good stock. If you stop winning, you lose interest. And for as long as we were bringing out puppies every year into the show ring and they went out and they did well, that keeps your interest.
Right. True. Very true. In terms of this, as you look back, and again, I'm going to ask you that question next. You got to wait for that question on what is next. But before I do that, what would you say has been your biggest contribution to the breed?
Oh golly, I don't know. I've never thought of it like that. Because although you're successful, you don't think of yourself as any different to anybody else. And you always think, well, there's somebody else that's got more to offer or whatever. And incidentally, although we were the top winning CC kennel, that record has now been overtaken. All records are there to be beaten. So I don't know. I suppose I think probably our biggest contribution has been through our stud dogs. Our stud dogs and their offspring have really dominated the breed for the last, I don't know, 20 years, I suppose. Now, you could argue it's good or it's bad. That's up to for individuals to make their own decision. But I suppose that's our biggest contribution. Has been the success of stud dogs.
Right. I want to actually ask you this question. I've not asked this to many people, many breeders, but I want to ask you this. You said you decide with your heart. Walker decides with the head. You have sent dogs, across the world to many countries. Has it been an easy or difficult thing to send your best dogs to different parts of the world?
No, I don't think so. We've generally never sent dogs to people unless we've known them anyway. So we've known where they were going, who they were going to, and anything what we've sent has been, maybe we've had 2 bitches in a litter, and one's as good as the other, so we've kept one and we've sent one. So no, I've never really had a problem with that at all. I've always enjoyed. We've not sent a huge number of dogs. We don't. We've never just exported dogs for the sake of it, and I've always been a bit precious about my breeding. I've never particularly liked the idea of it being out with my control, if you know what I mean. So that's why I've tended to only send them to people that I've known and trusted. For that reason, I have done it, but I've never been a huge advocate of sending semen abroad. Because again, I've just always felt that once it's out of my hands, I've got no control over it at all. And that has always worried me a little bit. So no, I've always been pleased for the people I've sent the dogs to, because I'd like to think that I've always sent good dogs to people, and these dogs have always done well for the people I've sent them to. Therefore, I've taken pride in it. Right.
In terms of what next? What's next? So what's next? Again, that's the question.
In what way?
In what way you mean? Okay, all right. So now you mentioned it's been a major portion. It's been a major part of your life. Boxers have been for the last 40 odd years. You like the bus. You love handling. So in that context, I know you're not always going to have boxers. I'm sure you're going to have 1 or 2 boxers at home. But what is next? How are you going to continue your association with this game?
Well, I suppose it's probably easier to start by saying why we decided to retire. Obviously, this has been a huge part of our lives. But as I said before, we do live in quite a rural area. Traveling has got more and more difficult for us. As you get older, it gets more tiring. Where we used to come home from a dog show and I'd go show jumping the next day, or Walker would go and play golf or whatever, we were finding latterly it was tiring. So there was a combination of, at some point we had to make a decision to stop dog showing. Because of our location, we were never, ever going to be in a position where there was always going to be a dog show 30 minutes down the road that we could go along and take one dog and just, you know, play about. When you live, as all the Scottish exhibitors and the Irish exhibitors do, when you live that far from the majority of dog shows, there's no point in going with one dog. And it certainly sharpens your mind as to the quality of dog that you take, because you're not going to put in all that effort for nothing. So we were always conscious that at some point we would have to make a decision and say, we don't want to be sitting at the side of a dog ring when we're 80. You know, and we have always travelled. We have a house abroad. We have always had other interests in our life, and we never wanted to wait till we to show dogs till we were so old that we then couldn't do other things. So we made a conscious decision to stop breeding about 3 years ago. I think Masterclass is the last litter we bred. Mm-hmm. Again, that was influenced by the fact that we just didn't really like the way dog breeding was going, and we couldn't really do exactly what we wanted anymore. Pet people were becoming, or are becoming, much more litigation minded. They expect a perfect product from you, which you cannot guarantee in an animal. So we lost our full-time kennel girl. So we no longer had her to rely on to whelp litters if we were on holiday or work a stud dog for us. So all these things began to add up. So we stopped breeding. The minute you stop breeding, potentially you've that's it. You've then no longer got stock to take into the ring. Right. So sooner or later, your animals that you're showing, you're going to run out of time with them, and the writing's on the wall. So that really was sort of all a bit of a conscious decision. We then did buy in a puppy out of Masterclass first litter, and we thought, well, we'll show this. And then COVID struck. And really, that just put the tin lid on it. Having not traipsed up and down the motorway for the best part of 2 years, we thought, yeah, enough's enough. Right. So it sort of seemed like a sensible thing to do, to say, that's it, draw a line under it, rather than dribble away at the last couple of dog shows, blah, blah, blah. Right. So basically, we golf and we go on holiday. Right. And we have plenty of things to. I took up golf about 6 years ago when I stopped competitively riding my horses, and I just love it because it is an extremely. It's a hobby, a sport which you can make as competitive as you like. And funnily enough, I never believed it would happen, but it fulfills my competitive needs. Right. So I've as to where I am going, probably out onto the golf course. Right. But, I've always been a very binary person. I'm either on or I'm off. It's black or it's white. I do not miss dog showing. I've something else to do. Right. I miss my friends, but I've no desire to go and sit at the side of the ring and watch a dog show, particularly. Right. Doesn't mean I won't judge. And I still am quite happy to go and look at puppies and all the rest of it, and more than delighted to have people round, discuss the dogs. I'm
Right.
always willing to show people my dogs.
Mentor people and
mentor people, yes.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely.
I've sort of drawn a line under the exhibiting thing. That's it.
Right. Yes. We're down to the last few questions, Yvonne. Thanks for being patient with me.
Yeah.
Now, what's the most common mistake that you see in newcomers with a breed? And I know you kind of alluded to that in a bit in terms of wanting perfection, them wanting perfection right away. But what do you notice when you see the ring? When you see people are making the mistakes, what is so blatantly obvious that the mistakes that people are making?
Well, let's say from a judge's point of view, the most obvious mistake people make is in their handling and presentation. So you can talk about the breeding thing as a separate issue, but from a newcomer's point of view, I think people have to remember at the end of the day, it's a beauty show. So you want to take your animal into the ring in the best possible condition it can be in. Again, I sometimes find when I'm judging, you can tell dogs that are well fed and not well fed by the condition under their skin, whether they're very there's no fat under the skin. You want a bit of condition under the skin. And I sometimes put my hands in dogs and think, I would just like a wee bit more condition on here. You want them well presented, and there is nothing worse when you're judging than a dog that you cannot assess because their handler can't control it. It won't stand still. You ask somebody to move in a triangle and it's up and down and round about and you can't see what it's doing. Or you go to look at the dog's head and they've got food stuffed in its face. And when they take their hand away, their chops are all covered in cheese and liver. And that is a basic fundamental mistake that I think some newcomers make. And they're not difficult things to learn.
Right. And if there's a piece of advice you would give for people to emulate your success, that want to emulate your success, what in the breeding front, what would that be?
Again, I would say, never be kennel blind. Doesn't matter how experienced you are, you've always got something to learn from somebody else. Nobody's dogs are perfect, so don't think yours are. Be prepared to keep an open mind. Go and see as many experienced breeders as you can and learn from them. Use a stud dog because he's the right dog to use, not because he's a certain colour, not because he lives within a certain mile radius from you. And I've always said to people, by and large, go and use the top stud dog because they're the top stud dog for a reason. Generally, that reason is because they produce the best puppies to the widest bloodlines. And I think that's probably one of the most valuable bits of advice I can give anybody. We live in a country where we have a very large population in a very small area, and there is not a stud dog in the UK that you cannot reach in a day. Whether people have the desire to do it is a different kettle of fish, but unlike the States, unlike Australia, where you might have to travel days to reach the dog you want to use, in the UK there is no excuse for using a dog if you want to use it. And my advice is use the best dog you can. If you mate to mediocre stock will only reproduce mediocre stock. So
Right.
use the best quality stock you can in your breeding program. And sorry, now I'm prattling on. It was a simple question.
Oh, no. It's
Also, you cannot find a kennel on dogs.
mm,
You can only really find a kennel on bitches. So, in my opinion, you want to keep the best quality bitches you can, and learn as you go on whether that bitch actually produces better than herself or whether she doesn't really, in which case that's not the one to be breeding from. Breed from the best quality dogs you've got that are the best producers you've got.
very true, very true. Thank you so much, Yvonne. I'm down to my last question. Thank you so much for this time. I know you love traveling. You're just back from Cyprus, enjoying the sun. You're back in the UK to enjoy the
Rain.
the wonders of winter, or what is in store. If you traveled back in time, and this is a question I like to ask all my guests at the end, because who doesn't like to travel back in time? I certainly do. I hope you do as well. And if you don't, please be patient with me. If you travel back in time, what are some of the moments you'd like to relive? And that would be limited to your 40 years with a breed.
I think probably the most exciting moment. Well, no, I don't know. That's maybe not true. Okay, I suppose the most thrilling moment must have been the day we won our first ticket, because that's never ever going to happen again. That's a one-off. So, yep, I suppose that's a great moment to relive. And incidentally, people think that when you've won a lot of tickets, it's not exciting anymore. It is, believe me, every single one is as exciting as that first one. But yeah, I suppose that's a very special moment. And I think probably the other moment that I would like to relive, because I think you get caught up in something and you don't have time to appreciate at the time, was when Romaro first issued bitch, Ishi, won Best in Show at LKE, which in my opinion is, the next biggest thing to winning at Crufts. And she won Best in Show there, and I would gladly relive that day.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. On that note, thank you so much for your time, Yvonne. For those folks that actually joined in late, this interview is going to be available. I'm going to be uploading this interview on YouTube, and that's for you to actually watch, share. And again, this is a knowledge share channel, Indian Boxer Ring on YouTube. So feel free to subscribe to that channel so that you can watch out for more of these videos and presentations on that website. On a final note, before I end this session, Yvonne, do you have any parting thoughts or comments that you want to share with our viewers?
No, I would just like to say thank you very much for having me on. I hope your audience has enjoyed it. I hope they've learned something. And anybody who wants to contact me personally at any time to have a chat, you're more than welcome. I'm always here to try and share some of the lucky things that have happened to us in our dog showing life. So more than welcome to share.
Wonderful. Thank you. On that note, Yvonne, thank you again so much for your time. Have yourself a wonderful day. And for the viewers that are tuning in, please look out for another interesting session coming up. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day and stay safe. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.